Hello and welcome to this Bone Matters extra session on exercise. This is a follow-on to our previous Bone Matters all about exercise when we spoke to experts in the field, and in this session we're going to be answering some of the questions that our members have sent us. And we're going to be focusing on exercise after spinal fractures with osteoporosis. And I'm delighted to welcome Sarah Legg, who is going to be talking with me and discussing the questions you've sent in. So perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself, Sarah, and tell us who you are and where you work.
Hello, I'm Sarah Legg, a physiotherapist working in Bath. I work in rheumatology and specifically with people who have osteoporosis and often people who've had vertebral fractures.
Thank you. And you may just recognise Sarah because she appears in our previous exercise films that we made a few years ago. So we worked closely together on that. And I know also she says that she does see many people, many patients who are asking the same sort of questions as this. So it's lovely to have you here today. So. Okay, so we've got some questions in front of us. Let's make a start. There's a couple of questions, very similar ones from Dawn and from Maureen, which are who have both had fractured vertebra, fractures in their spine, and are really wanting to know what exercises they should be doing, particularly in terms of rehabilitation, as they say, to strengthen their back muscles. So start us off, Sarah, with how can you advise, how can you help Dawn and Maureen?
So this is the sort of thing that we see day to day, people coming in after they've had a fracture in their back. And it'll depend, obviously, how long ago this happened. But if we were to take a scenario where these had healed, that it had happened a while ago, and that the pain and symptoms were reducing, then it would be safe to return to some exercise. The sort of thing that we'd be thinking, I noticed in Maureen's question that she has been waiting for a long time. There's not always the opportunity to see a physiotherapist, or as Maureen says, it can take a long time to see somebody. It is safe to start exercise before then. It's about being quite sensible about how you go into that and listening to your body. With Dawn's question, I noticed that she's saying that she gets a lot of pain when she stands still, and actually strengthening the back can be helpful for that. So there are various exercises that we've put onto the website resources for it. But as an example, a starter exercise, Dawn and Maureen might want to start by just squeezing their shoulder blades together at the back. So this is often in the form of moving your hands apart. So if you can see my hands, they're coming apart in a W position, and I'm just squeezing my back exercises, just starting to do this. If that feels right, then it might be something that they would progress to do with a TheraBand type exercise. And I know that there are, again, videos about how to use TheraBand on the Ross website. There are lots of other exercises that you could go ahead with, but it's going to be important to go in gradually if you know that you are post-fracture.
Thank you, that's great. And I think we've got another question actually that's very similar on this. Jenny, who says she's recovering from compression fractures in her spine, and she asks about best exercises, as you've described, but also about helpful practical moves she can make. And I think it's probably just worth mentioning we do have a number of fact sheets that try to address some of those questions around moving and lifting and bending forward. But I don't know if there's anything else you just want to say there that you perhaps advise your patients, Sarah, when they're, because there's a big worry, isn't there, about day-to-day activity, and is it going to cause another fracture?
Yeah, people tend to get quite concerned about when to return, and a lot of this would be based on how you feel, symptoms, how long it's been since your fracture happened, if you know when your fracture happened, which isn't always the case. With regard getting back into exercise, as you say, starting gently and gradually building things up, listening to your body. not adding in too many new exercises at one time. So I know that we provide a lot of resources in our leaflets and in our videos. You don't have to step straight back into everything at once. You can test the water, grade it up. But helpful and practical moves. I think practical moves is a really interesting thing to pick up on there, what Jenny's written, because some of the moves that we quite like actually do mirror day to day. So we like, for example, something that might resemble a kind of a push, and this might be if you're pushing a door, or if you're sort of moving something gently, and the way that we would replicate this is best kitchen counter, or even an area of flat wall, and you can just try a push-up in a standing position. Again, you could do this very gently at first, and if you felt more confident or you felt more able, you could start to step back away from that wall or that surface. But it's great to look at an exercise that does a lot of things in one, rather than lots of individual exercises. We quite like that for practical.
Thank you. And it's interesting you're saying we're touching here on people's anxiety, and probably just worth saying, we often do, that you don't have to keep still with a spinal fracture. You know, there's nothing about keeping it still to make sure it heals properly. But there's another question from Deborah, who quite an understandable anxiety, because she's had she's in her late 50s. She's had multiple fractures in her spine, and these seem to happen around the time she was doing exercises, which is very scary, and doesn't feel it's safe to do anything other now than just walk a bit with a stick. And I just wonder if you wanted to build on a bit of what you said already, really, which is a bit about confidence, isn't it? And feeling anxious, particularly if your fracture happened when you were doing a particular movement.
Absolutely, and you can see where if Deborah has that link between trying to exercise and do something and the fractures occurring at that time, it is very scary. And we know that in the messaging we're clear that we can never say you wouldn't fracture during exercise. What we can say is when we look at exercise studies and when fractures have occurred, we haven't captured that many during the exercise studies. So lots of people with previous vertebral fractures or lots of people with more severe osteoporosis are exercising safely. With knowing how to start when you've had such a difficult time like Deborah's had, it is tricky. Part of it is being able to, as you say, get that confidence back. It's also starting to turn it and think, actually, doing nothing is quite a risky situation as well. So when we don't challenge our bones, when we don't do exercises to help with our posture, are we actually putting ourselves at more risk in the future from this? So while exercise isn't completely risk-free, nor is not exercising. So finding a balance is going to be important.
That's a really good point. And it's interesting, many of these questions are touching on the same thing. So Pamela's talking about twisting. She feels that she was, whilst mopping the floor and twisting, and that caused a problem for her. And so that's really knocked her confidence. And we do hear people saying, can I twist? And obviously the answer is yes, but it's about moving smoothly, isn't it? And she particularly wants to build her confidence. I was just going to mention we have got some warm up and cool down type exercise films and videos which might be helpful, but I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to this. Again, it's confidence building.
Quickly say to Pamela that twist, it sounds like maybe, I don't know what mop it was that you were using, Pamela, but the fact that it was quite we talk about loaded, so against a resistance. So there's a difference between turning to do things, twisting, making sure that you've got the range of movement in your spine, which is actually really important, or fighting against a really unwieldy thing, or pushing a really heavy door, or trying to push a piece of furniture around. That kind of twist, a really loaded twist, a fast twist, are trickier, but to twist in day to day is important. We wouldn't want people to become stiffer and more uncomfortable.
And I think we try and talk about caring for your back. So many people have got back problems, as it were, and it may just mean you have to take that extra approach, don't you? And you approach things slightly differently. But it's been great to hear what you say, because I think it's starting again. As you say, when this happens, you feel paralysed, don't you, by fear about what you can and can't do. So that's great. And a slightly different question from Mike, who's a cyclist in his early 60s, who's had compression fractures, wants to get back, looks like he's recovering well, but the whole position on a bike is difficult. I'm assuming he probably has quite maybe a racing bike, and it's the position of his neck. And I'm not asking you to be an expert on cycling and what's the best bike, but I wondered if you presumably get patients who want to return, and there is something that challenges their position.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that?
So we get people through who want to return to various activities. I haven't had road bike recently, but we do hear about running and playing golf, etc. And it's just really important to weigh up how important these activities are to somebody and to their overall fitness versus what risk or what discomfort or whether they need to be adapted. So with Mike, if you are on a road bike that's quite low handles, it's maybe going to be thinking about a different position on the bike now that kyphosis is making it difficult for you. It would be worth speaking to your bike shop to see if there's any opportunity to raise the handlebars, or it might be looking at a sort of a different seating position. The same when we come across things like running and golf and other activities. It's about weighing up what's important to me. Are there any adaptations that I can make to this? We really dislike the idea of taking away somebody's exercise and enjoyment.
Yeah, and we cover that a little bit in the new safety film that we've produced, and I think it's also having to acknowledge that we don't have an absolute, no one is going to have an absolute answer. So it's not that there's an expert out there who can tell you. It's about weighing up a little bit and recognizing what's important, as you say, for you. And as you said, many people don't go on to fracture, so
Lots of people don't.
Being positive about that as well. Thank you. So there is then a question from Sophie, who's worried because she has an underlying post-viral fatigue, which I guess we're seeing with COVID as well. So I guess it's one of those things that's out there quite a bit in the news at the moment, but is really worried that she can't do anything, and really worrying about what that's going to mean for her bones. And I wondered what you say when you see people with other conditions who really can't exercise.
We do meet a lot of people who have fatigue for various other reasons, might be related to another rheumatology condition. It might be, as you say, that we're seeing it coming through in the population anyway. And exercise is important, but at the same time, it's being really aware of what's realistic for an individual. Some people with fatigue can do really well with a very sort of gentle graded exercise program that can be slowly built up over time. For other people, that is challenging, and it depends what the fatigue is from. It's worth probably acknowledging, because of what Sophie says in her question, is that she's finding even the activities of daily living are a big struggle. So how could she think about exercise on top of that? Well, we can think about, actually, sometimes when you're doing your day-to-day activities, this counts towards your physical activity aims. When we define exercise, we usually mean something we deliberately do to try and improve our physical fitness or health or strength. And fitness is something, our ability to do our day-to-day activities. But your day-to-day activities still count as physical activity. So if someone in Sophie's situation is still doing physical things with their activities of daily living, this is good. And the other thing that we would say is, with a lot of the exercises that we recommend, it's okay to take a bite-sized chunk. We're not asking for a kind of a larger time. So the example that I said right at the beginning, where we were opening the hands out wide, just squeezing the shoulder blades together, even just starting a few of those would be something. And the exercise guidelines in the UK do use that phrase, something is better than nothing, even if it's really steady at first.
No, I think that's great. And it's that whole idea, isn't it, of exercise and continuum. So there might be really optimum types of high or moderate impact and in progressive muscle resistance. That might be the best. But if you can't do it, well, anything's better than nothing, and it helps with reducing the loss of muscle and bone strength. So really, I think it's a really great prompt, and that'll be reassuring for people who do feel frustrated by what they can and can't do. I was just going to mention men again, because we sometimes get told that everything's about women, and it's good that we've had some questions in and hopefully we're tackling them for men. So Dave also, and it ties in with what we've already said, has had a fracture which he feels repaired, and he's ready to move forward. And don't forget us men is what you're saying. That's a good point. And I think it's about whatever activities you're doing. Anything else you want to add in there at all in terms of his movement into doing more?
So doing more. So it sounds like it's obviously it's difficult to know exactly, but it sounds like Dave might be at a stage to go on further, and looking at some of the exercise and advice that we've got online, but maybe even moving into some of the strengthening exercises that have been developed more recently, some of the new resources. It might be nice just to know there's that continuum, and that if someone's ready to take things a little bit further, there's that option.
Yeah, so that's just perhaps a reminder that we've got some new exercise films, and the section, the 3-stage plan for muscle strengthening does take you through some very specifics, which might be helpful also perhaps to take along to a fitness trainer or a gym and discuss, so that you can get guidance. Because I think we're hearing here, aren't we, the frustration not being able to see someone like you, Sarah, physio, which is very frustrating, particularly after fractures. But it may be that a step on, hopefully you can move into a sort of fitness gym situation.
Yeah, absolutely. If you were moving into a gym type situation, it's to be really open, if you feel comfortable about your osteoporosis, and if you speak to the gym, does anyone have any expertise there? If it's a gym that's not particularly manned, then maybe looking at the resources that Ros has before you go and start new exercise, so you know what you're aiming for, whether there's anything to avoid or do differently.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, it's getting instruction if you're not feeling sure. We don't want anyone to plunge into something they're uncomfortable with. That's great. I've just one final question from Mavis, which is around a specific, and we do get asked questions, and you've mentioned golf before, but I wouldn't mind if you said a bit more about golf. But this is someone who wants to play balls when they're bending down, and I just wondered if what you say to your patients who perhaps had a previous fracture and want to go back to doing or playing bowls.
Absolutely. So I think that it's about making a decision between what's important for you and what you enjoy, and the fact that there are potentially risks with everything that we do in life. With bowls, I think that I don't know bowls very well myself, so I don't know how heavy those bowls are. But certainly if someone were to hold a weight away from the body, that does make it a little bit harder if they're going to then lean or bend forwards. But you can think about bending from the hips rather than bending your back. If you can look at your sort of technique, trying to make sure that your ergonomics, the way you move your body, as steady as possible. The spine, we tend not to like something that's too jerky, that's too quick, and it's going to cause a quick movement in a more risky situation. So if we took that across, for example, to golf, where I've seen quite a few patients, that fast move is one of the ones that we come back to, saying, okay, this is something for you to weigh up. One of the other questions that came through, I think, was from a gentleman who was playing table tennis and pickleball, Edward, and he's saying, I currently play this. I had a vertebral fracture a while ago, or 2 vertebral fractures a while ago. Can I keep playing this? And in our clinic, we would say, absolutely. If you're currently doing something and you feel well and it's part of your fitness and part of your social, finding out that you had fractures a while ago, or hearing advice from someone and you're not quite sure if it applies to you, if you keep doing what you're doing, that would probably be the best thing. I'm not saying I'm going to recommend that people take up golf and bowls and pickleball, but if you're currently doing it and it's something you feel comfortable doing, then we'd encourage you to continue.
Thank you. And just a quick point about golf, would it be useful as well to sort of work on some of these back muscle strengthening exercises to sort of support the spine? Because I'm assuming, I'm not a golf player, but I'm assuming some of those movements are going to be a lot better if you've got a strong muscles to support that.
Yes, so some of the exercises that we're looking at for strengthening the back are looking at trying to increase the strength of the back and that kind of the posture of the back. So you might be looking at exercises like you'll see online on hands and knees and reaching forwards with an arm, maybe reaching backwards with a leg as well, alternating. This is one exercise that people can build up towards, and we think it's a useful exercise for the back. And doing these exercises outside of the activity that you like to do, the bowls or the cycling or the golf or the pickleball, that's going to be really important for you.
Thank you. Well, I think we're going to have to stop there, but it's been really, really useful, and I'm sure people are going to value hearing, you discussing the specifics of their situation, and really useful. So thank you, and thank you all for listening. Just the final point would be that there are a number of links below this film to the ROS resources, and we also would encourage you to give us any feedback to help us with future sessions. So thank you, Sarah, and goodbye.